This week, we're doing another pre-record, this time for our first episode to air in 2026. So you should be seeing this on January 5th, 2026. Like the episode we recorded for the last week of 2025, the format here is going to be less structured and more conversational. The cybersecurity industry seems a bit obsessed with predictions, particularly around this time of year. So that's what we're going to be focusing on this episode. And we're going to talk about the predictions folks made in the past for 2025. Did they come true? How good were those predictions? We're going to talk about the predictions folks are making for 2026 going forward, maybe include some of our own predictions, and also just talking about the nature of predictions and why they're so often bad. At least I feel like they're bad. I have a whole rant about this. You'll hear it in a minute. All that and more in this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. AI has officially moved past the hype. The question isn't should we use AI anymore, it's how do we use it in a way that truly helps. Meet Delinea Iris AI, practical AI to secure the modern enterprise, designed to work quietly in the background, making faster, smarter access decisions, reducing risk, and giving your team time back. This isn't AI for show. It's purpose-built for identity security, boosting productivity without adding friction. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Delinea. Ever feel like your network infrastructure is stuck in the past? Meet Meter, the company reimagining what it means to get and stay online. Meter delivers full-stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular, all in one seamless, scalable, and secure solution. From hardware design and firmware to software deployment and support, Meter streamlines every part of your network while giving you all the control and transparency you need. Whether you're managing a branch office, retail stores, or a massive data center, Meter gives you performance, reliability, and the visibility you need to stay in control. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring. Go to securityweekly.com/meter to book a demo now. That's securityweekly.com/meter. METER. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and Happy New Year. This is episode 440, recorded on Wednesday, December 16th, 2025, though you'll be seeing it 2 weeks later. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Dean of Data Science and Knight of Neurodiversity, the Watcher of Data Center Waste, Jackie McGuire. How you doing, Jackie?
Howdy. I am good. I am injured and I've done all of these things to myself, but I have this secret theory that it's kind of like defragging your hard drive, that if I just keep hurting myself and my body keeps having to regenerate, maybe I'll live forever.
I like that.
I like that theory because I, too, have injured myself recently. I fell down a flight of stairs a couple weeks back, and I am still recovering from that. One of my legs does not have all axes of motion in the way that it should.
Yeah, I saw an anecdote that was like, you get to a certain age where you're like, am I hurt or is this just how I'm going to be now? And I can't like that.
Yeah. Also joining us, the Baron of Bloodhound, the Pirate King of PowerShell, Sean Metcalf. How you doing, Sean?
I'm doing good. Not dealing with issues as Jackie, and I definitely have not fallen down the stairs recently. So I'm doing really good compared to my co-hosts. Adrian, just remember, you're not a stuntman.
I mean, well, it's amazing because I still have managed to never break a bone. I've never had a cavity, so really strong bones and stuff. But I keep wondering, like, how, that doesn't go on forever. Like,
right.
Like, is this going to be the one? And falling down those stairs, I had enough time to think, oh, this is going to be bad, because I didn't have a hand on anything. It was right at the top step. It was first thing in the morning. I was supposed to jump on a plane in 2 hours. Fernanda, my partner, had already jumped on a plane and sent me a text and said, here's the 3 things I forgot at home that I need you to grab for me. And that's what I was doing, going down the stairs, half asleep, waking up for my flight, pulled on a pair of pants, fell down the stairs, laid there for about 30 seconds to let my nervous system like allow me to move again. Like everything was shocked. I couldn't even move. And pulled myself together, got to the airport, and even though I was wearing thick jeans, I had scabs all over my legs from the ride down to it was rough.
I fell downstairs. Luckily, I was crawling when I hit the stairs, so I crawled over the edge of the stairs and kind of tumbled all the way down, and they were carpeted. So I very vividly remember having carpet burns on every part of my body you could possibly have carpet burns on.
Yeah.
So send help, everybody. Like and subscribe so that we can afford our medical bills.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm taking these stairs multiple times a day, every day. So I've been having a lot of flashbacks to falling down them. So that's fun also. All right. So that was not something I predicted for me this year, but let's talk about some other predictions. Let's talk about, did cybersecurity fall down a flight of stairs this year? 2025 has been interesting. And before we get into any specific predictions, I want to kind of talk about, here's my rant on predictions, because I feel like the vast majority of them shouldn't be called predictions. They should be called observations, right? This is just where threats are going to increase in 2025, right? There's going to be more AI stuff in 2026. All you're doing is observing what's happening right now and saying it's going to continue to happen, or it's going to happen more in the future. I feel like that shouldn't even count as a prediction. That's just an observation. It's like saying there will be banks in 2026.
I mean, unless you're totally wrong and you said that NFTs will still be popular in 2025.
Occasionally it does. I remember IDC, if you go back, if you can still find it online and find IDC's predictions for, I think it was 2009 or 2010, I think 2011, something right around there. That was the point where PC sales started to dip and never went back up. Right. And the main reason for that impact was the release of the iPad and the surge of tablets. And there were older generations, certain, folks who basically just needed a web browser. And we saw an attempt to do this a decade before. There were internet appliances. If you remember some of these things, they were basically something you would plug into your TV. And then it came with a keyboard and, or it came with a small screen or something like that. I actually have one behind me. This is if you can see this thing, it's not well lit here. This is the 3Com Audrey, and that comes from 2001. And 3Com, you might think of your 56K modem. They made networking gear, but they branched into this. Sony made one. There was one called the Eye Opener or something like that. And just a little basic PC that you could get on the internet, use a web browser, have your contacts. It actually synced with a Palm Pilot. You could sync a Palm Pilot with this thing.
I had one of those.
Yeah. But yeah, occasionally there is this kind of big market shift where, things don't go up and to the right. And I'm wondering if 2026 is going to be that for AI.
Yeah, and these days we have internet PCs, but they're called Chromebooks.
Yeah, those kind of filled that niche, right? They're inexpensive, they're easy to use, and the bonus is they're pretty secure, and yeah, they have kind of filled that niche where it's really just a web browser is the interface.
Ironically, many are cheaper than an iPad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. iPads have a huge range. You can spend $250 on one or $2,500. It's insane.
Can I just say how useless I find mine? I got an iPad Pro because I was like, I don't want to carry a laptop around. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get this really expensive iPad. And I'm going to assume that because it's extremely expensive, has a decent processor, has a big screen, it will be able to do most of what my MacBook does, or even my Mac Mini. And it doesn't. It's a glorified iPhone, and it is the most useless. I literally use it like every 2 or 3 months when I absolutely don't want to have to bring my MacBook Pro because it's so heavy. And it seems like such a missed opportunity. And I don't, maybe it is because they know if they make it do what a Mac Mini does, it's going to cannibalize MacBook sales, but it's awful. So now I have this MacBook Pro, I have this stupid iPad Pro, and now I'm thinking about getting a MacBook Air. Yeah, like
So,
is that an Air?
I did the same thing. So this is my MacBook Pro, and this is my Framework laptop, and they're roughly the same size and weight. Once you add the keyboard thing to it, I think the iPad may be heavier. I've not actually weighed them, but as I hold them here, they feel like exactly the same weight. And I've been trying to do the same thing, and I do get work done on the iPad, and when I can't, I actually have remote desktop set up to this PC that I'm using right now, which actually works fabulously well on it. But just basic things like right now, I have 3 Notion windows open. Like I've got the show notes and my script, and I've got 2 other pages in Notion that have my notes on in my rants on predictions, and I've got a list of bad predictions and stuff like that. You can't do multi-window with Notion on the iPad. And just because Notion hasn't built it into the app, like some apps can do multi-window, but others can't. So you run into these just very basic software limitations that make it impossible to get real work done. But I mean, half the time I'm just getting through my email and stuff like that, and it's fine for that.
Yeah. I like they intentionally, Apple makes all of the Google suite work like absolute trash on iPad so that you'll use, like, I'm not going to use Safari. Stop trying to make Safari a thing. Like, it's so stupid. Yeah. And like, I don't know about you, but when I use Chrome on my iPad, I constantly get that, like, this is not a supported browser. Like, I hate it. I hate it. And the thing that I found, so I never thought I would be one of these people, but I got a folding Android phone, and this thing is awesome. Like I found this.
Is it a Samsung or Pixel? Which?
It's the Pixel 10 Pro Fold or whatever. It's the one that just came out a couple months ago. I got that, and then Targus makes this super cool folding Bluetooth keyboard that's only about this big when you fold it up. That actually works really well, and I carry those now. And I don't know. I'm just so disappointed because I love my MacBook Pro. I love my Mac Mini, and I spent $1,500 on an iPad Pro that is useless, just useless. So do better, Apple.
And that's kind of the interesting thing, you know. So getting into my rant on predictions and kind of the anatomy of a good and bad prediction, you know, this does get kind of into it where, you would assume it's got the same hardware, the same processor, like a ton of RAM. The hardware looks great. You know, but then what are the engineered software limitations there that prevent it from, achieving what you would expect to be able to do with it? And so generally what I've found with bad predictions, oftentimes it's the person predicting doesn't understand like all the nuances and complexity of what they're predicting. You know, like when people say AI is going to replace all these jobs, they don't understand what those people do. When they're making that prediction. Like once you dig into what those people do and you look at what generative AI specifically is capable of, you realize, oh no, it actually can't replace that. And like same thing with like media generation and stuff. If you don't understand what people value about the media that they listen to, sure, you might predict that we'd be replaced by Notebook LM long before now. Right? Like this whole year would not be us human beings on this podcast. It would just be AI doing it if you didn't understand what the audience valued and what the sponsors value. And there's just a lot of bias. People
are going to be rational. Like I always find that. So my last boss at the last time I had an actual 9 to 5 was a Gartner analyst for a long time. So of course he was like crazy about having to make predictions, and he actually set his criteria for predictions was almost like SMART goals. If you guys are familiar with that, they should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time constraint, like all of that stuff. And a lot of it was based on people acting rationally. Like if this happens, of
Yeah.
course people would do this. And it's like,
So
when have
that's on my
people
list.
ever been rational?
So that's one of the things on my list. Failure to take human behavior into account.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like flying cars. Oh, we're all going to have flying cars. You really think the average person could be a pilot?
They can barely drive their car.
They can barely drive their cars, right? Like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
You think
I witnessed the most insane accident yesterday. The exit to go to my house has like 2 left-hand turn lanes. And we have a lot of mines and a lot of constructions. There was one of those giant, like 40, 50 foot long dump trucks.
Mines.
No, not
Mine.
not that, like mines, like copper.
Okay.
And so he's doing the right thing. He's in the middle lane, which is the outside turn lane. And this dude in an SUV towing a boat decides that the best thing for him to do is to try to take the inside turn lane while this giant dump truck is trying to. And of course, the dump truck.
Oh, he's going to change lanes mid-turn? Is that?
No, he was just in the inside. And so I've driven a 40-foot school bus. I've towed trailers. You never take the inside turn lane. It's just, even if there wasn't a giant dump truck. So the giant dump truck turned, and of course he has to cross the center lane to make this pretty tight turn, even from the outside. And he just took off like half the boat and half the dudes. And I was like, why would you do that when you're towing a boat? Just like wait for the dump truck to go. Yeah. And the people are just
because he forgot he was towing something, right? Because the pickup truck has 1,000 horsepower and forgot it was back there. Right?
Yeah, it was just the most crazy thing I've ever seen. Yeah, and you watch people do these things that you're like, why would you ever do that? But even when I pruned my thumb because I was trying to prune a tree with kitchen shears.
Yeah.
After that, I'm like, why would I do that?
One of the ones that I've seen for flying cars, the Jetson One, which is $128,000, and that looks pretty interesting. But I think really you just have to have a lot of land to drive it on. I don't even know that you can just take that. I don't think you can take that on the road. It's not street legal. So while there are quote unquote flying cars, you're limited to how you can use them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So another couple of things here. There's some biases. One of my favorite websites, I was going to take out I do have the cards. They're right here. So you can go to yourbias.is and they have posters. They have cards to help you better understand different fallacies and biases. Because once you're aware of them, this comes with 24 logical fallacies and 24 cognitive biases. I think most bad predictions come from some of these. Like in the cybersecurity industry, there's something called negativity bias. Just because something can go wrong or can be hacked in our case, right? There needs to be a whole product category around it, and we've seen whole things grow up where it doesn't end up being a thing. Like Zimperium at one point was putting host IDS on mobile phones. Right. I don't think we needed that. Right. Like they're already sandboxed to the nth degree and everything comes to the Play Store. Like maybe if you're getting stuff from some third party shady Play stores, app store or something like that. But related to that, pessimism bias, groupthink as well is a big thing. Oh, this startup is doing, post quantum crypto stuff. So, you see a dozen more pop up. Where it just you assume the person next to you knows what they're doing, and then sunk cost fallacy, of course, is another big one. And there's little cards for each of these, so I highly recommend these. Maybe you can get some in time for Christmas, but they're really handy. I usually go to the website. I forget that I have the cards sitting here on my desk. But we mentioned human behavior. The other one is failure to take market behavior into account, as well as historical context. So a lot of these predictions can easily be debunked just by looking at what traditionally happens in history. And like my example here was, I was shocked at how many people were on LinkedIn like, CrowdStrike is done. Like that company is not going to survive this after they had their big snafu in 2024. And the whole time I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, dude, Volkswagen backed Hitler, and they're the second largest car company in the world. Like,
Well, you can't even get people to change SIMs when their SIM isn't working, much less it has some blip. But like, if you failure to take into account the stickiness that stuff has, like
Yeah.
you can, and I've been in companies that we help people change SIMs. I built a SIM, and it's like you can build the greatest SIM in the world, but if a company doesn't have the time and resources to migrate, it's going to take a hell of a lot more than a 1-day blip to get them to do anything, because the cost of that is astronomical compared to whatever the small outage might have cost you.
Mm-hmm. And related to that, stickiness is good enough. You're competing against good enough. You know, it doesn't matter that your product does it better or that they're not doing it right. You're the one doing it properly. Oftentimes, like those more perfect solutions have more complexity baked in. There's more overhead. And, you know, like that was my assumption when enterprise browsers came out is, man, it's going to be tough to compete against Chrome because most people aren't angry or frustrated with Chrome. So why would they jump to your enterprise browser for $50 per endpoint per year, whatever enterprise browsers are charging for that? And, you know, I've come to really appreciate some of these enterprise browsers because they actually do replace like some of your SASE products. You don't have to lean on it as much. You don't need as much. If you have one, you can do some cool stuff that you can't really do with any other products. But I guess we'll see. We'll see how much adoption it gets. It may end up just more of a niche product that you use mainly for your contractors, not for 100% of your staff. So we'll see.
I think some of the enterprise browsers have started to like Island, I think, is a Chromium based. So it would be a pretty easy swap out for Chrome,
Right.
but then it's still anytime you're doing a risk assessment, it's likelihood and then cost. Right? Like what's the likelihood something's going to go wrong? What's the actual cost if it does? And then it can be high likelihood and low cost, and you're going to ignore it. So I think you have to really demonstrate a high monetary impact coupled with a higher than very unlikely risk for people to even want to consider doing something differently. And that to me has been the biggest challenge with enterprise browsers is if you've got all your other tools in place, if you're doing microsegmentation, if you've got EDR, like it is pretty hard to argue that something very, very costly is going to happen and that it's worth retraining, having to reinstall things on every single endpoint. Oh my God, documentation. I wonder how many projects get killed just because the person who would be responsible for documentation is like, nah, no way.
Yeah. And how much budget do you have per endpoint? You know, what's your OpEx per endpoint that you're willing to spend? Because these enterprise browsers are almost certainly going to be more expensive than like a EPP suite or even EPP plus EDR. So.
Do you have survival bias in there? I went down a rabbit hole on that with aircraft the other day.
I don't have survival bias in there. I don't know that it's in the cards.
Yeah, so this was a big thing in the military with aviation, in that the military, when planes would come back from war, they would look at where the bullet holes were and figure out what needs to be reinforced based on that, not considering the fact that they were looking at the planes that survived, and they really needed to be looking at the planes that were taken down. And there's all of these different that didn't survive, that didn't come back. And so there's a lot of really interesting studies about it and studies about how many decades it took us to get past that and actually start armoring like fuel tanks and things like that on planes, because we were only looking at where the planes that came back were being targeted. So I went down a rabbit hole because somebody made Christmas cookies that had like little red dots. And they were like, look, I made survival bias cookies. And I was like, what is that? And so anyway, I think that's another big one, is that like, if you only look at the people who've been successful in something or the fallout of something, not the companies that imploded and why did they implode. And we tend to like not necessarily do very good postmortems on things that fail. We tend to more glorify the things that succeed. And that also is a huge impediment to making good choices and predictions.
And we don't see a failure either, which is the key point of it.
Right. And that is, so my RSA talk that got accepted is on, why breach transparency is so important. for exactly the reason that you just described. We'll be using a lot of examples and things like that. So I am looking forward to that. And with that, let's wrap this segment, and we'll be right back, and we'll talk about some specific predictions for 2025 and whether or not they came true. So we will be right back. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive Security, the first cybersecurity company backed by OpenAI. AI has fundamentally reshaped the threat landscape. Today, the greatest risk isn't someone breaking into your systems, it's someone breaking into your trust. Deepfake voices joining your video calls, AI-crafted phishing emails that perfectly mimic your executives, even synthetic job applicants entering through the front door. Adaptive Security is designed to counter these new realities. The company delivers real-time attack simulations that show security teams exactly what modern AI-driven threats look and sound like, and prepares them to respond effectively. Learn more at securityweekly.com/adaptive. Let's face it, enterprise data is everywhere. It's spread across apps, devices, and hybrid cloud environments, and traditional security tools are struggling to keep up. That's where Sky-High Security makes a difference. Its Security Service Edge platform brings together capabilities like data security posture management, remote browser isolation, secure web gateway, and AI to unify and strengthen data protection. Designed for today's digital landscape, Sky-High Security helps organizations discover, classify, and track sensitive data, no matter where it lives. To learn how businesses are future-proofing their data security, visit securityweekly.com/Sky-High Security. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your defenses. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. We are back with part 2 of our predictions episode here. And in this segment, we're going to be looking back at some of 2025's predictions. So the predictions made in December 2024 and see how they held up. All right. So I did a number of things here. I had ChatGPT pull some together, and then I did some searches and just pulled up some posts. And as you would expect, there's a lot of junk. Like one of them, this one post, like more than half of them are just topics. Gen AI and cybersecurity. That's their prediction. Quantum computing and cryptography. Okay. Increased focus on IoT security. And even some of these that are just topics, I'm not sure I saw that happen. You know, I think one of the big things, so vulnerabilities in 5G networks. Did we see any vulnerabilities in 5G networks?
I don't remember any.
Not that have been disclosed.
Yeah, nothing specific to 5G.
Maybe some of the devices that run 5G had vulnerabilities, but yeah, I don't recall anything even, I don't recall even seeing 5G come up. Well, there is of course, there's the Salt Typhoon attack. Maybe that counts. Them getting into telecoms infrastructure, though I don't think that had anything to do with 5G. From the details I've heard, I think that has to do more with the previous Gs, with all the
Gs, the OGs.
Yeah, the OGs. Very good. Yeah, I think in one case, somebody mentioned with a single username and password and no MFA, at one telecom, you could access over 100,000 devices.
That's ridiculous.
Jeez.
Yeah, so that's, like most of the security failures that we see, just a foundational architectural problem. Like you never want a single employee to have that much access to things, particularly with no MFA enabled.
Right.
Yeah, the only the only thing even somewhat adjacent that I remember from earlier this year was a really interesting it was more like a threat intel about Russia using data broker information. So data brokers and the false, what are they called when you put the fake cell towers in trunks and things like that. So they were
Stingrays.
using a combination of those and
Stingrays?
buying information. Yeah, a combination of those and buying information from data brokers to help locate people who are going back and forth between like military bases and embassies and things like that, and being able to, with pretty high specificity, identify ambassadors, intelligence people, like those types of things. So not vulnerabilities in networks specifically, but maybe vulnerabilities in the amount of data that mobile networks will share about you with data brokers and the ability to triangulate your location with a handful of stingrays.
And beyond that, with what is it? Flare? What is the license plate photographing? Flock. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, my smart vents are Flare. I'm getting mixed up. I'm having many old man moments. Did they start after I fell down the stairs? I'm not sure. Anyway, I didn't hit my head that I can recall.
I really hope that you end up with a Stairmaster in your house, or not Stairmaster. What are the lift things? What are the stair lift things called?
I don't know what they're called. I'm sure I'll find out.
Yeah, but what's crazy about the Flock license plate readers too is that they're very like, I didn't know what they looked like until a couple weeks ago. Like I had seen the ones that are on like the highway signs, but I never knew that the ones that are in mall parking lots, that's just like a white thing with a blue light at the top of it. I thought those were like police emergency call boxes, or
that's what I thought those were
their license plate. Or
boxes.
No, it's Flock. Yeah, Flock. Yeah.
Yeah. That was news to me too. I think it was a 404 Media podcast I listened to where I was like, oh, I didn't realize that's who owned those things and put them out there. But also any kind of parking garage you go into tends to have these kinds of things. That's how they know when you arrived, when you parked in a certain space. That's how they know when to come and tow you, when to ticket you, is your license plates being photographed. And so I think that in itself is an interesting trend, that government doesn't have to deploy their own surveillance technology if all the tech companies are willing to share that data with them.
Right.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I think has started to happen though is that people are combating that. So 404, you just mentioned, they had a FOIA forum where they taught people how to use AI to draft Freedom of Information Act requests.
They do like once a quarter. They do them. So yeah. For the audience, catch one.
People started using those, and in a couple states, it was ruled by courts that Flock readers were public information if the police are using them, and they've actually pulled them out of a few. It was Indiana, I think.
So they had to share.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Well, also their cybersecurity was terrible. They had a whole bunch of databases that were public facing that you could access with with the readings in it. So, yikes.
So I didn't see that as a prediction. What we're talking about here, that tech companies will gladly hand over this data, often without warrants and without notifying the people who own that data or should own that data, right?
Yeah.
I guess once you're out in public, you don't own that data anymore. It's just public record, which I think it's funny that they were able to turn that around on them and say, yeah, actually you have to give everybody access to that.
Yeah.
So what was the other thing I wanted to talk about here? So I think the big one that I saw on almost every list here was attackers using AI. And I think this is predicated on one of the biggest lies in cybersecurity, which is the lie that defense and offense are caught up in this kind of cat and mouse game. and that defense is always getting better, but attackers are always getting better. They're always getting more advanced. They're always getting more sophisticated. And that just doesn't match up with reality at all. Attackers will do the same thing over and over and over for years, for decades, if it works, right? You know, they don't change unless they're forced to change. And then you look at the defense side, and again, they tend to not change unless they're forced to change. So new regulation, going back in history, I think the biggest improvements in security I've seen is because Microsoft made a default configuration change to Windows. You know, like when Windows got a default deny firewall, that was huge.
That was huge.
You know, before then, any open ports were just open. There was no firewall unless you actually went out and bought a piece of firewall software for your laptop or your desktop. And Chrome, when Chrome decided to pour a lot of investment into, or Google, when they decided to pour a lot of investment in making Chrome more secure, because back in the day, it was extremely common to get infected with malware just from browsing a website, right? You know, because of Flash or because of a Java plugin or because of
Flash,
Silverlight, or, you know. So locking down browsers, again, that's not something a security vendor gave us. That's not something defenders did. It's something that the actual tech ecosystem, you know, the companies that can have a huge impact because their code is running on everybody's machines. So I think that's a whole misnomer, this, because AI exists, attackers are going to throw away their current how they do things, their MOs, and they're going to rebuild all new ones and spend a whole bunch of money. Why would you if calling somebody up and asking for MFA resets works?
Well, it's the whole AI is taking jobs thing, you know, that AI is taking all these jobs, like you said. Probably not. And AI today is about augmentation. So augmenting skills, augmenting capabilities. So from the red team's perspective, from the attacker's perspective, they're going to use AI where it makes sense for them to get better at what they're doing, which means it's a social engineering and working through the responses could be something that AI could help with. Certainly framing and setting up a good phishing email that's custom to an industry. That could be something that AI can augment itself. Just like it might be possible to leverage some AI capabilities on the blue side to understand what the threats are and understand how to mitigate some of those. But I definitely don't think it's going to be a all-in replacement of what it is.
Yeah. Well, and Adrian, we've both been analysts, and so research analysts, and a lot of these things have been like, I've seen these research reports come out the last 6 months. That's like 90% of cyber attacks now involve some type of AI, you know, like things like that. And that may be
doing a search on Google involves AI.
Yeah. And I think some of it's true, but some of it's also analysts make these predictions at the end of 2024, and then they set their research agenda for 2025, and then they find a company that wants to sponsor a research project, and then they ask questions in a way where they're going to get you don't ask a question in a research survey as an analyst generally unless you already know the answer.
Right.
And it's really, really hard to be unbiased and not write questions in a way where you're going to produce the answer that you really want to. So it's all just kind of this circular,
self-licking ice cream cone? Is that what they call a self-licking ice cream cone?
I don't know. I've never been that far down a hole on the dark web, but
I've heard that.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's no accountability for it, right? It's not like you're going to lose your job as an analyst if your 2025 predictions didn't come true. So it all seems like an exercise in kind of intellectual grandstanding, but we have to play the game.
So that is a one of the biases I pulled. Crap. Let me pull my notes back up here. Which one? It's self-serving bias or belief bias, confirmation bias. Those are all kind of similar. It's like, you're more likely to, lean towards things that already match with your beliefs, or in this case, your research agenda. Same thing with confirmation bias or self-serving bias. Like, you already have the data that says this thing, so you're going to jump on anything that seems to back it up. And that's why we have a lot of myths in cybersecurity. That's why people love these, $10 trillion of damages in 2025. I think it was supposed to be 10.5 trillion is supposedly what we were going to spend on cleaning up breaches in 2025. And I don't think we can get to 1 trillion with the data that we have right now.
Well, and if it really was that much, we would have a financial crisis.
Yeah, there'd be market collapses.
All the insurance companies who wrote those cyber risk insurance policies and had to absorb those losses would become insolvent. So, that's where I think like it's great to say something, but then if you go 4 or 5 layers deep from that and you examine all of the secondary and tertiary industries that are connected to cybersecurity and say, okay, if we really had $3 or $4 trillion worth of losses and all these companies are insured, what does that mean? And that means the 6 or 7 companies that manage all insurance in the world would have that many trillion in losses, and that's just not believable. Adrian's like, I swear I didn't find this terminology on my Tor browser.
What is that?
Self-licking ice cream cone, or an ice cream cone with a boomerang.
Who made Ross Matheny? What are you doing, Ross Matheny?
Cursed AI images. No, but I think
that's 2011. I think he hand drew that in Paint.
Yeah, yes. In MS Paint. Yeah, with a mouse, which is impressive because getting curves is not easy in MS Paint with a mouse. But yeah, I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. I saw this research survey where one of the questions was like, are you concerned that MFA alone is not enough to protect your employees? And I was like, how I know a company who has a marketing
it makes me super
tag
happy.
That's MFA alone is not enough wrote this?
Yeah, that's really bad. That's just that's malpractice. That's analyst malpractice right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. We.
So did you write predictions for 2025?
We're not there. That's going to be the third segment. I did not, but I'm going to sum up some of the ones that I mentioned throughout this year, because I did make some predictions. The other thing I wanted to mention here on the side of bad predictions, I actually pulled a bunch of historical bad predictions. I've got a bunch of quotes here. I predict the internet will soon go spectacularly supernova and in 1996 catastrophically collapse. You know who said that? The inventor of Ethernet.
Oh, Bob Metcalf?
Yeah.
Guess how I know his name.
How? Yeah. And he literally ate his words. He printed it out and ate the paper.
Oh,
he literally ate his words after that. The idea of a wireless personal communicator in every pocket is a pipe dream driven by greed. Guess who said that?
I'm going to go with Steve Jobs.
Yeah, I was going to say Steve Jobs.
Intel CEO Andy Grove at the 1992 World Mobile Conference. Guess what processor you'll never see in any smartphone, and we never saw in any.
Yeah,
none of them have Intel processors in them. What's the state of Intel today?
No Pentiums in your iPhone?
Coincidence? Probably not. There's no reason an individual would ever want a computer in their home.
Bill Gates?
That is Ken Olsen, the founder of DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation. Yeah, from the mid-'70s.
I guess if you think of computers as like vacuum tubes and, wires that you have to switch, you can envision that nobody's going to want that in their garage. And maybe that's part of the problem, is that sometimes people think about the digital divorced from the form factor, or the form factor divorced from the digital. And it's really hard to predict. Like, I know we have Moore's law, but we've broken that multiple times. So it's really hard sometimes to step outside yourself and your reality and think forward to nobody ever, well, it would be very hard to predict if you're in the punch card and vacuum tube stage of computing that you would get to a point where you could have a computer that's this big or a Raspberry Pi, like that's just something that's very hard to conceive of because the number of breakthroughs that have to happen for that is very hard to predict.
Right.
Yeah.
And programming with punch cards. I mean, you'd have to have a whole bunch of punch cards at the ready. And like you said, it would fill up your garage, if not several rooms of the house, given the time frame, because houses were smaller then. So it might even be the size of an entire house.
But there were good predictions from back then. There were, I mean, Dick Tracy talking into his watch.
Oh, yeah.
Like there were people that really saw, like they looked at it from the utility first. They looked at like what would be useful to people and just assumed that technology would get created that would enable that eventually down a long enough timeline.
But how do you tell whether it's somebody watched? Yes, but also did we innovate in those areas because somebody saw that, right? So like that's one of the things I struggle with is like, is it because that was useful or is it because somebody watched Dick Tracy and was like, I really want to make that happen? So I struggle with that with the personal assistants we have today, right? Like, I think I always wonder like what happens first? Is it people chasing some, fictional thing that we invented, or is it really thoughtful, forward looking? And I also wonder to what extent, like, this thing's actually kind of annoying, to be honest with you. And every time I've tried to take a call on it, I've regretted it. I did it earlier today. So what are we not innovating and inventing because that expectation was set 25, 30 years ago and we're chasing that?
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it is because, again, in a lot of these cases, you have to take in all those human factors, those economic factors into account. And yeah, I mean, I moved back away from an Apple Watch back to a Pebble for exactly that reason. I think the Apple smartwatch can do some incredible things, and I don't need any of them. I don't need my watch to do any incredible things. I need it to tell me when my next meeting is. I need it to wake me up in the morning sometimes. I need it to tell me what time and date it is. And I need notifications from my phone. Like one of the key things I use my watch for is not looking at my phone. So I only these select few apps that I really want to see stuff from get to go to my watch. Everything else gets seen whenever I feel like picking up my phone, looking at it, or turning on my computer. So I think
voice
a lot of
assistants are the same thing. I hate like every time I try to use whether it's Gemini, Siri, Alexa, whatever it is, and AI has made them worse. It has not made them better. And every time I try, it's like, I'm not sure, but here's what Google says. And I'm like, well, I could have freaking Googled it myself if that's what I wanted.
Yeah, check your phone. You want me to send this to your phone?
I recently got from Alexa Plus, it was something to the effect of, yes, got it. Something went wrong. I'm like, wait, what? And then I did it again to see if it would do it again. I was like, I got that. And then it was like, something went wrong. Try to do whatever. And when I went back and checked it didn't work. Because one of the things I like about the Alexa Plus is it can remember things for you. So if you tell it a fact that's about you or your household, like I put the pizza tray inside the cupboard next to the pantry, and it will remember that for you and be like, where's the pizza tray? And then it'll tell you where it was. I was trying to do that, and it was like, got it. And then something went wrong. So then I asked where the pizza tray was, and they're like, I don't know. Do you have a pizza tray? Do you want a recipe on how to make pizza?
Well, one of our other issues is I have 3 kids. My foster's gone. So I had 4 kids in my house at one point that each had their own Google accounts. And those things are not made for a house that has multiple different accounts using like 25 different smart devices across your whole house. And if it can't recognize my voice from my now almost mature daughter's voice, that's the other thing is like these innovations happen in a bubble where the person at the voice assistant place in Google was like, oh, these are really cool factors. But then the person in charge of selling more hardware at Google wasn't like, well, gee, if we fill somebody's house with 20 of these things, the voice assistant might become less effective. Because that's the other issue we have is I'll ask a question in my kitchen and something upstairs will answer. I'm like, how is that useful?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So many problems. My favorite quote, we can't end until I read this one. The computer industry is the only industry that is more fashion driven than women's fashion. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I have no idea what anyone is talking about. What is cloud? It's complete gibberish. It's insane. That was Larry Ellison at Oracle World in 2008.
Seems about right.
I'm going to bite my tongue on Larry Ellison right now.
All right. Let's see. What other bad predictions here? I think we didn't cover many of them, but honestly, most of the ones I saw were repeated from 2004 and will be repeated again for 2024 and 2026. So platformization, resiliency, AI. I'm really interested if the AI market does implode, how that that could have a big impact on a lot of these predictions here.
Well, also the post-quantum encryption, because many of the companies trying to sell you post-quantum encryption right now would have you believe that we're going to get to a level of quantum computing in the next 24 months that is affordable enough for hackers in Nigeria, North Korea, China to be able to use at scale to be able to hack you unless you're implementing post-quantum encryption. And some of these things are just You have to know that nobody that actually knows how technology works or what it costs to run these things are making very self-serving predictions. But I argued with somebody about that for like an hour at one of the, I think it might have been at Supercompute, but I was like, so you're honestly telling me that quantum computing is going to fit in a size box and be affordable enough for hackers who are being paid dollars a day to all be able to have, and instead of just buying a password for $3 on the dark web, they're going to be using quantum computers to hack my MFA. Like, really? And
Right.
They would absolutely have you believe that within the next 18 to 24 months, that's a reality. And just, that's insane.
Yeah, to Adrian's point, attackers are going to do what works, and the old thing is often the new thing again because it works.
Yeah. And I have a whole spiel on this for IONS. I did a webcast on this. If you're an IONS client, you can go watch that. I did a symposium on it, which is like a workshop, and I did 4 forums in Q4 on that. And yeah, it's an unpopular position that no, this is not going to be a threat. But the TLDR is, look, that's the route that we've chosen to go with cryptography. So you have to update anyway. Because we all have to be speaking the same protocols, the same ciphers and everything. So, you might as well upgrade your stuff because your email server and my email server need to be able to choose, a working encryption.
So you only have to fool a handful of people. And then once it becomes standard, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, right?
Well, I mean, that is kind of the nature of cryptography, is it takes so long to come up with ciphers that work and can't be cracked. And you have to get it proliferated out to everything. And that takes time. They have to make some guesses. You just can't afford in that field to second guess. Attacker behavior today isn't like that, so it's not going to be in the future. Like they have to be on the extreme safe side with things.
Yeah, I remember when I believe it was NIST that put out a call for papers on what was going to be the AES standard, and when Reindahl won that, after that was selected and used and documented how long it took for AES to actually be used in public environments.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, when there was that example of that CFO deepfake that resulted in $25 million being lost, if you guys remember that, people went nuts. And there were a lot of predictions that 2025 would be the year of the deepfakes. I guess depending on your idea of deepfakes, like, are attackers using AI to write phishing emails? Sure. There were audio deepfakes. I think we saw a lot more of those. But I think after that one incident, people were like, oh, that's going to be a common thing, are video calls that are deepfaked as, your CEO, your family members, something like that. I just don't think we saw that, though. I think there was a lot more audio deepfake going on.
Yeah.
All right. That's it for looking in the past, and looking in the future. As I said, I think is going to look similar. We're going to go ahead and wrap up this segment, and we'll be right back for the third and final one. Identity and access management is hard. Whether it's administering identities, managing and controlling access, building, implementing, and enforcing policies, or governing the whole thing, IAM is often the realm of inefficient processes, bloated implementation timelines, and expensive and complex projects that struggle to solve problems. Thanks to Junto, those challenges can be a thing of the past. Junto delivers a full-stack IAM platform with a microservices architecture that delivers all of the functionality your unique environment demands, and an implementation model built for rapid and relevant time to value without requiring specialized staff and skills. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Junto. Cyber threats follow a familiar path, an attack chain reused across the globe. Fortra knows how the enemy operates, so you can stay one step ahead. Our advanced security solutions detect, disrupt, and defeat threats at every stage, protecting your data, business, and customers. With Fortra at your side, the battle ends before it begins. Visit securityweekly.com/Fortra to see how you can get total attack chain coverage. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly for our third segment here for our predictions episode here. And so this is where we look forward at other people's predictions, share our own predictions, and that's gonna wrap up this episode for us. Jackie, what do you have?
Yeah, so I was just reading back through my predictions for 2024. So when I was doing go-to-market at Cribble, I wrote some predictions for 2024 that were published in, on VM blog. And one of them didn't come true until this year, but I had written in 2024 that over-reliance on APIs was going to create extra concentrated risk in cloud computing. And that as everybody kind of switched to using API services rather than dashboards, and my whole point was that if we're all on US East 1 and US East 1 takes a crap, it's probably going to be an issue. And this didn't happen in 2024, but it sure as hell happened a couple months ago. So yeah. I think that was one of them. I've seen a lot of things. So one of the things I wrote,
in a way, right?
Yeah, it just creates like these very high value targets. And while this one was a configuration issue, we talked a couple months ago about the Great Firewall in China. They blocked all for some unknown reason for like almost 2 hours. Port 443 was just completely blocked in China. And that if this happened here, holy crap, that's HTTPS, that's all of your APIs. And most companies don't have a fallback plan. And so I stand by that prediction, and I think we're going to continue to see the fallout of that, and that we've completely over-rotated to the cloud, and AI is just exponentially increasing that problem, because at the end of the day, all of these different services are reliant on like 3 different technologies all working. And as we saw with, DNS routing and configuration this year, that's caused massive issues. For what Cloudflare had a DNS issue, AWS had a DNS issue. So I think that's going to continue to be an issue, but I think that's also something that anybody with eyeballs and a computer could probably predict that. Yeah, and so I think the ones that I've seen that didn't come true this year, obviously, like I think we've had a lot of predictions about China and how China's cyber espionage and cyber attacks were going to completely cripple our critical infrastructure and things like that. And I do think that's going to come true. It didn't happen in 2025, and I think it would take some other geopolitical event to be a catalyst for having a good reason to do that, because China's economy is incredibly reliant on the US economy. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think some of the geopolitical things we've seen have not necessarily come true. But I do think that the dominoes are being put in place increasingly between a defunding of US national level cybersecurity and over reliance on APIs and concentration in cloud services that, and we were just talking before we started recording, what I was saying is that I think sometimes my mistakes have been when you see a technology come to market finally, and you're like, oh, wow, within the last 3 months or 6 months, we went from only a couple million people using AI and LLMs to millions and millions of people using them. You kind of tend to extrapolate that out without realizing there's some logical limit to that adoption. And it didn't actually really happen in just a couple months. There's like 2 years of work that went into that and all of the go to market for that. So yeah, so I have a handful. I had written that I thought managed services were going to be one of the fastest growing areas of security in 2025, just because I think that the complexity is going to make it really, really difficult to manage your own security. Just if you're under 1,000 employees and you only have 10 people in your security function, it's going to become very, very difficult to 24 hours a day staff the kind of 5 nines that you need to make an enterprise run. Let's see what else I had. Logging. I had written that logging that was going to become a volume issue and would cripple some organizations if they didn't set up logging for AI correctly, and ended up having terabytes of logs that they didn't predict from all of these different API services, or even just like VPCs. So yeah, and some of this, I don't know if we're going to know if those predictions came through, because some of it's dependent on the kind of disclosure that we
Yeah.
don't mandate right now. And, we let public companies determine what's material and what's, what needs to be disclosed. So I'm going to say I was right with everything I predicted, and people just aren't willing to say I was
Awesome.
right.
Yeah,
As a true analyst would.
there's so much that happens, like internal incidents. If you're not required to share it, there's a whole iceberg under the water of I never worked a breach in the 5 years I was chief incident handler at the organizations I worked for. Never worked a single breach. It was just all stupid stuff employees were doing internally. Some stupid stuff, some nefarious and malicious stuff. There was embezzlement, espionage, drugs, even some potential spying from China that we ran across. But there's, again, we talked about breach transparency earlier. It's really hard for us to figure out where to focus if we don't know what's going on, if we don't know what the failures look like.
Yeah, well, and is hiring a North Korean hacker accidentally a material cyber event? Because I think Mandiant and Unit 42 have both done surveys in the last year that found that almost every Fortune 500 has done that, but I haven't seen that disclosed. That hasn't shown up in their SEC filing. So I guess you have to determine what they touched and whether that qualifies as a material breach.
Well, I thought materiality was more about, how much is that going to cost you? Or is it going to impact your investors?
Financial impact.
Right, financial impact. And I just don't see a lot from hiring a North Korean hacker, especially when compared to, ransomware team shuts down production.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing with North Korea and with China, they don't really have an incentive to attack or damage anything, because they're making money off us, right? They don't want to kill the host. They just want to siphon off it.
Yeah. Yep.
Or in China's case, I think it's more of a breaking case of glass. We want to have access to a bunch of utilities. So if we need to make the threat, we're in a position to make a threat. Maybe. I don't know. Not really my area. geopolitical stuff.
I try to stay out of it, but it's so hard.
So one thing you mentioned, Jackie, that was interesting that we talked about on another podcast that I do, the Alice in Supply Chains podcast, was how much outsourcing is going on between SaaS stuff, cloud stuff, whether or not AWS goes down, Cloudflare goes down, whether or not your MSSP does a good job, or your MDR. What's left for CISOs to do? It was basically making this argument that you've outsourced, the average company has outsourced so much stuff that you're, I don't know, anywhere from 40% to like 80% of some of these company security programs are in the hands of other people outside the company, which I thought was a really interesting observation.
And one of the things that I've found, talking to friends who have responded to some of these breaches that happen with outsourced vendors is that they also, when you outsource, you also outsource visibility into what was breached. And so I've had friends who responded to incidents where significant data was breached, but that's just based on what that vendor sent them and said, hey, here's a zip file of all the things we think were touched by these attackers, but you don't have an audit trail. You can't send your own people in to audit, So I think the other thing is that there may be significantly more damage and fallout in some of these attacks than we see because it's in the vendor's best interest to minimize what they tell you. And then there's also, I think we talked about that earlier this year, there are now cyber insurance companies who, as part of your policy, they get to do the incident response. Yeah. And so if I have to pay out for all of the damage and I'm also the person assessing the damage, it's just like when your homeowner, like when your house gets damaged in a hurricane, right? And then the insurance company sends out their own claims adjuster and they make a really low estimate for what it's going to cost to repair all that damage. And you end up in this crazy back and forth. We're seeing that on a cyber level now too. And I'm not sure how healthy that is. But I don't know what the alternative is, whether there should be some, disinterested third party who comes in and does that assessment. But I also wonder about that a lot of like, how much do companies really know what was exposed? Because I've had companies reviewing here's the data we think was accessed, and they find other companies' data in there. They find government data in there. I had one person who found clearance forms for another company in this data. And they're like, hey, did you tell this other company that their employees' social security numbers and dates of birth and addresses? And they're like, oh, oops, thanks for telling us. Yeah. I don't know Sean, do you see the same level of like only disclose what you absolutely think you have to disclose?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like when a company looks at what it's been exposed, what is, been gone after it, they're going to try to limit what kind of blast radius has occurred, so to speak, for that. They're going to look at what they can verify and validate was touched. But there's not going to be any assumptions. They're not going to be anything like, okay, well, they got to this, so they must have gotten to this next step, even though we don't have information that they got that, or we don't necessarily have to say that they got to that next step because that's not data related, even though it's identity related, like Active Directory. Compromising Active Directory means compromising everything in that corporate environment. But they may not say that, okay, well, they didn't get to the SQL database that houses XYZ because we don't see anything that would identify that. But then again, our logs don't go back that far. So there's this cherry picking of information that is definitely going on and happening in these cases. I think that the thing that they're going to definitely talk about or disclose is if PII has been exposed, if there's credit card information, that sort of information, such as what's happened with telecoms in the past, where it was like, they'll even say we were breached, but no customer information was exposed, or only the customer's name and email address were exposed. And that's pretty much how they're trying to base it and limit it to what they can say reasonably that will get them kind of off the hook. Or they'll say it was really bad and then just drop it on a Friday evening.
Yeah. So I did some research on this, Sean. And I found that in many, many, many cases, like the only one I can remember off the top of my head was WatchGuard. They came out and said because they had this breach where you could see people's configurations for their firewalls, because they had this service that would back up your firewall configurations for you, and that got hacked. And initially they said, I forget what the initial thing was. It was like some single digit percentage of customers were affected. Later came out, and of course, that one is day of, right? That's when the story breaks. That's when 500 outlets cover it. And then a couple weeks later, they're like, yeah, actually, it was 100% of customers affected by this. And like almost nobody covers it. So I think I don't know if it's an intentional strategy. I do know that there's lawyers that specialize in trying to minimize, the impact of the company and like what they share. Or to even be misleading with it. But
well, there's also entire PR companies that all they do is crisis PR. So they'll tell you, here's the strategy, here's how you bury it. The other thing that I think I unfortunately
you put out a bunch of positive stuff about the company so that when you Google it, you don't see the bad things. Yeah.
Go spend $10,000.
And you have
on
AI
SEO.
Generate that stuff.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I learned the hard way is that there's what gets leaked, like there's what's breached, but then there's also inside a company what's improperly collected and held. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies who are FAFOing with AI and are holding, information like in your contract with a customer, you have limits on what information you're supposed to collect and store and have access to. And one of the things I've seen over and over again is companies who are building AI bots, AI account service things, trying to build like automated workflows are inadvertently collecting data they are not legally allowed to hold or store. And sometimes because AI collects such a vast amount of data, they might not even know they're sitting on it. So if you have sensitive customers, whether it's DoD, whether it's government, whether it's financial institutions, and you're trying to do some customer service bot that these companies have restrictions on, you cannot, you need to let us know where all you're storing things like organization configurations, organization structures. And then you've just got a data scientist in there poking around, collecting data to be able to respond to customer service things. I've had multiple companies that inadvertently are retaining data that they're not allowed to hold. And then if that data gets breached, then like not only are you having to tell the customer, hey, we had a data breach. Oh, by the way, it was information that we're legally not really allowed to be holding for your company, but the data scientist didn't know that because they're not in your contract. And that's another thing that I want. Here's a prediction for 2026. AI and companies trying to use AI for customer service is going to be one of the sources of significant data breaches where you didn't even know you were holding that data. So when it gets exfiltrated, you're like, wait, how did this data end up in this random S3 bucket? And it's like, well, we were trying to build a chat bot.
Yeah, so that was another thing that I gave a lot of talks in the IANS forums this year on was data security for, in preparation for AI. And nobody liked what I had to say on that, which was that you need data flow diagrams. You need to understand how data flows to your organization, where it lives, where it comes from, where it goes. And to do that, you're going to have to interview a bunch of people. And they're going to say a bunch of shit. And like 60% of what they say is going to be accurate. The other 40% is based on guesswork or the way it used to work. And they forgot that the process changed. So now you're going to have to go scan file systems and take packet captures and look at those. And this is all the stuff as a PCI QSA I had to do to confirm that payment data was actually limited to the cardholder DMZ. So that's just one of the things you had to do as a QSA when you did audits. And 100% of the time, I found that payment data outside where it was supposed to be contained within, because that's just the nature of data. Like I keep talking about it like it's water because it has a lot of the same properties. Like you have leaks, it ends up in places, it creates rot. It just creates problems for you, especially if you try and keep it inevitably, like you have no life cycle. You just keep all your data forever and you never get rid of it because, again, you don't understand it. You haven't connected it to business processes. You don't know when you're allowed to get rid of it. Even if you do want to get rid of it, maybe the execs say no, like we might need that one day. There's this kind of, hoarding effect, FOMO effect that people have. What if that could make me some money one day? And they're not seeing the other side of it, where you get fined for holding too much data. And the FTC has been doing a lot of that over the last 4 years.
Absolutely.
Well, not that not that security people are not the greatest at interacting with other people, but there's also the retail therapy aspect. I interview companies all the time who say, "Oh, just install this one agent and you'll magically have visibility into everything in your environment and you'll have full control over it." And if I'm not always the most people person. And so I'm like, well, would I rather spend $100,000 on a tool or have to go talk to everybody in my organization? I'm writing a check.
Yeah. 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 And that's,
I was just going to say, similar to what you do with data, I do with identity, where looking at the authentication flow and figure out where that authentication happens and what are the key things that are part of it. And I think it's important for an organization to understand that because of the identity systems that we have today, specifically Microsoft's Active Directory and Entra ID, are so entrenched in what's there and how access is attained, especially as attackers are going after those systems more and more.
Yeah. Well, and even MFA, like I think about, you have these MFA that you can do push notifications and just hit a button and say, yes, it's me. But I have those on my personal devices. And I often find there's no MDM that makes me have like more than a 4-digit 1, 2, 3, 4 pin on my phone. Like if there's no security enforced at the absolute endpoint of where that authentication happens, what's the point?
Yeah. 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 And for all these reasons and more, my prediction would be continued stagnation on the defense side. I think if the defense side improves at all, it's going to be because you're, upstream or downstream, your supply chain has done it for you. In a lot of these cases, I do not, and it's for all the reasons we talked about here that it's really hard. What I call the asbestos of IT. Like there is no reason to keep around old file transfer appliances and TCP based, where you have to expose ports of the public internet, VPNs, and why anybody has their management ports on their firewalls exposed to the public internet. I will never understand, or RDP for that matter. But people are still using these things, and there's more secure ways to do it. But yeah, it's not on the security side. It's the IT side that needs to rip and replace how they do things. They need to change their processes. They need to, proactively refresh their technology, and reducing complexity, making it more homogeneous. Like there's a whole bunch of things that you can do at the IT level that just makes security so much easier. But that's not what they're focused on. They don't have a lot of incentive to do that.
Yeah, or extra bandwidth.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, my prediction is basically more of the same. What we're observing in 2025 will continue into 2026. I don't think there's going to be a magic solution that AI can fit and solve. I mean, the MIT study said 5% of companies have found some benefit with AI. I think that'll go up a little bit in the next year. It'll probably go up to maybe 10%. But I don't think it's going to, we're going to have this magic 8-ball where all of a sudden AI is going to solve a lot of things. I mean, what we've seen so far in 2025 from generative AI is that the models have effectively showed incremental improvements. They haven't been exponential like they were early on in the phase, like they were in 2024. So I think we're going to see more of the incremental adjustments in models. I don't think we're going to get to a true auto and aware AI in 2026. So that's my prediction.
Super intelligence.
Right.
Well, and how much of the security market would that cannibalize if it actually happened? And this is the shitty thing,
right.
Is I know I'm cynical, but none of the security companies want that to be a thing. Unless they can build a walled garden around it and charge you exponentially more for it. Like, why the hell would I want magic configuration and management of anything? Because that would cannibalize billions of dollars in tool revenue for all the other vendors. So Active Directory, there could be an absolute like magic pill with AI that completely solves all your Active Directory problems. But how many companies would go bankrupt because of that? So what's your incentive if you're a venture capital investor and one of your portcos comes up with that solution, but it's going to kill the other 400? What's your incentive to do that? And until we can make it profitable for that magic AI pill to do what it's doing, I don't know. I know I'm a jerk for saying that, but like follow the money.
I agree with you. And I'll actually say that the my prediction for Active Directory is that it continues in use and will continue past 26 to 27 at the same rate.
Mm-hmm.
I think that dovetails into my prediction I've been making all year that if we don't see any AI SOC acquisitions by the end of 2025, then that market is not a viable market. And so this isn't the same as saying that AI isn't useful in the SOC. What I think is happening here is that it is easy enough to benefit from in the SOC that you don't need to buy a product to get value out of it. So I think a lot of people out there are just building it themselves, or just, analysts are using it directly. Either that or the cost is so high of using a vendor for it that nobody has budget for it, with which we've talked about the $9 per alert pricing that you can glean from Drop Zone. And that certainly puts it in that latter category of maybe too expensive to afford. But yeah, it's, I think, I don't know if it's going to be 2026, but I think it's inevitable that AI will be seen as a huge disappointment. And I think it's inevitable because the hype, super intelligence, which is why I shouted that out earlier, is just unreachable. Like we know the limitations of the technology. Any improvements that we've seen in 2025 have been incremental, not the huge leaps we would need to do the things that they're claiming it's going to do. So the only question in my mind is when that occurs. And I think it's probably going to occur. It's going to coincide with a big financial event.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that the concept of superintelligence is such a myopic view of humans. And I think anybody who's actually built an effective team knows that the best way to build a team is to hire 10 different people who all see the world in completely different ways, who all think in completely different ways. And this concept that there is some objective thing called truth is just bullshit. Like objective truth does not exist in reality. And thinking that you can build one model that sees the world one way, trained on information produced by people who see the world in 10,000 different ways, is just stupid. And yes, we have gotten to the point that LLMs are more intelligent than the 6th grade reading level that average people have in the United States. That's great. But the real innovative and disruptive things are not happening in the middle of the bell curve. And the reason people end up at the edges, the right side of the bell curve, is because they see the world in a completely different way than the vast majority of people do. And we keep trying to think we're going to build one model to rule them all when the world is subjective. No two people think alike. And I think it's just a really, really simplistic, myopic way to view human intelligence. And it's also really narcissistic to think that humans are the most intelligent things in the world. Like, I can't wait until the apex predators crawl out of the ocean and eat us. Because they're like 4 miles deep in the ocean going, these freaking idiots. If they put a data center in my habitat, I'm going to kill them.
Jackie, that leads to another prediction that I'm going to make, is that we're going to see more models that are fine-tuned for specific things. And I think that something like a SOC model would make sense, where that's trained specifically to be a SOC. This generic LLM approach or model approach, where they are just open to everything, have been trained on everything. I don't think that scales anymore. I think it's crazy expensive. And I think that a lot of these companies are going to continue with that because that's what they're expected to do. But at the same time, there are going to be more specific models that are tuned to specific use cases that are much more niche than what they are today.
Yeah. Checkpoint claimed to build their own foundation model. I just did a webcast with them, and I was very clear. I was like, "Did you take Llama and fine tune it, or is this something you trained from scratch?" And they said they trained it from scratch. So we're already seeing examples of that in cybersecurity. They said they trained it on like hundreds of million, like all this attack data that they have. So it seems like it's somewhat specialized. It's not something you would use to create a recipe for, sourdough.
Yeah, well, and I think
Probably
like
the worst example I could come up with.
the nature of human creativity and innovation is very inefficient. FAFOing is very inefficient, and you can't take models that are programmed to be as efficient as possible and expect them to produce the same kinds of tangential thinking that makes humans what they are. And so thinking about like a Marcus Hutchins screwing around with WannaCry and finding a little domain and being like, let's see what happens if I register this domain. An AI model that's trained to be efficient with tokens is never going to do that because it's not an efficient step in the process. And so until we figure out how to actually replicate the type of weird, like framework jumping, tangential, like inefficient process of human creativity, we're not going to replicate super intelligence because super intelligence would not be efficient. It would be a very inefficient model because it would need to think in 1,000 different tangents and then have that model be able to decipher which of those tangents are useful and which are not. And just thinking about the layers of compute required, the layers of comparative analytics, I don't know. I really, really hate thinking that Python is going to somehow replicate the way the smartest humans among us think. Is just, you can't do things both efficiently and creatively. Those things are in inherent conflict.
Yeah, there was an article I was actually saving for Thursday for the next normal podcast that we do, the last one of the year, I think. Basically it was saying the headline is AI hackers are coming dangerously close to beating humans. And then what they describe is a vulnerability scan followed by autopwn in Metasploit, right? And I'm like, that is not a penetration test. Right? We were able to automate that long before AI. We didn't need AI to do any of that. Like the whole point of a penetration test is that there are things the automated systems won't catch. There are, you need a human inefficiently to go in and just using their experience and their ability to recognize patterns to spot something weird and point it out to you. And that is not, like these things are not either not well defined or not well understood. That's
mistaking faster for better. And there's a difference between faster and better. And I think some people just have a really hard time understanding that yes, can an AI do a red team or a pen test faster? Absolutely. Is it going to be better? Probably not.
Yeah, this is the choose two here is faster and cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't get better. You don't get better with AI. Yeah, you get mediocrity, and that's where it stands. So yeah, AI is going to continue to be used, generative AI, for the foreseeable future. But at some point, I do think it's going to be seen as a failure because so much of that investment on it is just not going to be recouped.
Yeah, entertainment.
Well, and maybe we'll even see some valid, interesting use cases for agentic AI in 2026.
That was actually one of the predictions for 2025. Exactly that. And I forget which one I pulled that from, but I don't recall seeing any of that.
Instead, we're making 8-second videos of pit bulls lifting weights in a gym with Sora because that's a more effective use of 10,000 gallons of water and a gigawatt of electricity, apparently.
Well, it's certainly easier.
Yeah.
All right. With that, thank you so much, Sean and Jackie, for joining me today. This one was a lot of fun to do. Glad we got to do it, and I got to do it with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Happy New Year.
A big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Our second episode should be a more normal episode in January. And in real time, we have not yet done our last normal episode in December. So we're a little confused, but we will see you soon.